And without further ado, back in the big chair, sir, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm just excited for these conversations. We talked a little bit off air, but take us back all the way to 1969 with your start in radio. How do you get in the broadcasting business, and just, take it away from there?
Well, actually, I lived around the corner on Wyoming Road, and I was out messing around in the front yard, and one of my high school buddies came walking by, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to a junior achievement meeting at the radio station?" And it was like, I have never been in the radio station. I have never been in junior achievement. And sure. So we came up here, and I had forgotten that Don Statz was in junior achievement in Parkersburg. So that's how he and I kind of got tied together, and Don ended up coming up here and working with us and then going on. But the junior achievement was probably the neatest thing. We had a product that was a radio show. And for a bunch of high school kids, we had to sell the advertising, because that was a big thing with John at the time, John Wharff.
Right.
And, you had to go out, you had to sell the advertising, you had to write the commercials, you had to produce the commercials, and then we put it all together on the air. And our product was a 1-hour radio show.
Wow. And how the junior achievement, for the people that don't know, me being one of those people, is that just something that was coordinated through the high school?
No, actually, it was a national program.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I don't know if it still exists or not, but they would take high school students and give them the opportunity to, it wasn't really learn a trade, but you would be exposed to a business.
Right.
And the people in the business would teach them how to do this job. And it was kind of neat, because at WMOA at the time, everybody did everything.
Oh, yeah. But not much has changed on that front.
And, so I came up, and that night I became the production manager of the company.
Right.
With zero experience. And I must have been doing something right, because 2 weeks later, the vice president quit, and I became the vice president. 2 weeks later, Larry Steinel called me in the office, and he said, "John, would you like a job?" And it was like, wow.
Right.
That was just the ultimate. Great respect for Larry, and Ray Rosenblum, of course, owned the station at the time. Rich Galen alluded to patience the other day, and I really appreciated the way we were treated as new people. 17-year-old kid had to go to Cincinnati, get my FCC license, because, as the other guys in the past had said, where we're sitting now was the transmitter room.
Right.
And we had legal federal requirements every half hour to take meter readings, adjust what need to be. Fortunately, at the time, Charlie Clark lived across the street, so our engineer was real close if we got into trouble. But the patience with Larry and Ray was really good. I was talking to your office manager a while ago, and I said, it was a Saturday afternoon, 17, 18-year-old kids, and I was out in the front yard playing Frisbee with my girlfriend.
Right.
And Larry pulled in the parking lot. And Larry said, "What are we doing, John?" And I said, well, the Reds are on AM, bottom of the third. I've already done station identification. The next commercial is a network. The Indians are on FM. They're in the top of the fifth. Already done station identification. And the next spot is network. And Larry kind of looked at me, and I had the doors propped open.
Right.
I was monitoring it.
Of course.
And he just kind of walked in and went in his office. And it's like, okay, it's it was patience. It was learning. And it was a wonderful place to work. I mean,
Kind of those, do as I say, not as I do. But it's like, if you're steering the ship, then, he's like, okay, I guess he does have it under control.
Well, without using numbers, at the time, there were 3 telephone lines that came into this building. Line 1 was always hooked up to a reel-to-reel recorder. So if you happened to be out and something breaking news happened, you could call in tell the guy on the board, flip the recorder on, and we would file news stories that way. I remember I was in Belpre one time, and a barge blew up to the point where there was sheet metal from the barge on top of the train bridge.
Wow.
And there was no glass anywhere in downtown Belpre. And I found a payphone, dating myself.
Right.
I found a payphone, and I called it in, and that was how news happened at the time. Line 2 was 373-1490, which everybody called because that was the advertised number. Well, line 3 was a rollover. So if line 2 was busy, it automatically rolled over. So if you're working on the weekend and line 3 starts ringing, you knew it was the boss calling saying, you need to do this or you need to do that.
Right.
So it was a respect thing, but all of our supervisors would listen. They cared.
Right, and not much has changed in that sense to where, Johnny is still very active with the programming and operating of things, but keeping with the water, the river had reminded me to another thing that we've heard rumblings about being Dr. Fish. And so kind of, just break down that and maybe kind of illustrate what that means.
Well, I heard Rich talking about Dr. Fish, and just by coincidence, I was in Belpre at the Belpre Aquarium last week, and the gentleman that owns the place lives on Harmer Hill. His name is Ken Stoller,
right?
And we were just talking about WMOA and what a great thing it is to have live and local on WMOA. So I had bought a couple of different things, and Ken said, "You want me to help carry it out for you?" So I said, "Yeah." And we're standing in the parking lot, and he says, "Have you been listening to all these old DJs coming back?" And I said, "Yeah, Ken, I'm going to be on next Thursday." And he looked at me, he said, "You're kidding." He said, "No." I said, "No." And he explained to me at the time, I didn't realize it, that similar to what is done at Apex, where Johnny goes down and talks to Cogswell.
Right.
Rich Galen used to do a program with Ken Stoller from the Marietta Fishing stuff. Well, Rich gave Ken the nickname Dr. Fish, and apparently it stuck. So a lot of the longtime advertisers in Marietta are still listeners. They still appreciate the live and local.
Because it's just something that you can't get, not to toot our own horn, but with the syndicated stations now, as to an untrained ear, maybe it could sound local, but you start to realize nothing is localized. Nobody's referencing anything in our neighborhood, and I think that's what we pride ourselves on. And with another great memory to kind of transition, we had talked off air briefly about an all-star football game of sorts, so that's something I haven't heard about, so just take it away there.
Well, I did not work on the road a lot, but on one particular weekend, John Wharff asked me if I would go to Canton, Ohio with him to do the North-South High School All-Star football game. Coming from a small town, we were not given the Class A press accommodations that maybe we deserved.
Of course.
We were on the roof of the press box in Canton, Ohio, which is okay.
Right.
We had our telephone wires strung up there. And,
oh, yeah.
well, John would do play-by-play. I would do a little bit of color, but I would do all the stats. And then halftime came. John would go get a hot dog and come back. Well, I had to do the halftime show. Midway through the second quarter, it started to rain.
Oh.
And we were using what amounts to a whiteboard.
Right.
So after about 20 minutes of downpour, all my stats for the first half had washed away to a blue puddle at the bottom.
Oh, my goodness.
So second quarter ended, Big John got up and off he went to get his hot dog, and I had to read the program. That was about all the information that I had, and talking about the different kids from this high school. And this guy's a monster. At the time, he would have been 6'3" and 255. And
right.
But yeah, that was
start filling in adjectives where the stats are missing. Kind of.
That's all there was to do, because even then, it was live.
Right. And, as you know, in the radio business over the years, you kind of realize how to wing it a little bit, and keep the ship steered. And that kind of moves similar, right, with the, I believe it was in Massachusetts, kind of a football game of sorts. So talk about that.
I think it was 72, could have been 73. The Bronco League, which is young men, older boys, baseball. And
Okay.
it was here in Marietta. And they did very well. They won the state, and they went to the national championships, which was in Massachusetts. And at the time, I would have been a college student at Ohio University. And
I'm a fellow Bobcat, so that's awesome.
at the time, we had I was on the East Green. I had a class at 8 o'clock in the morning on West Green. So I started to grow a beard.
Right.
That's all there was to it, because I was just too darn lazy to get up and shave. Well, John said, you want to go to Massachusetts with me and do this ball game, you got to shave. So that was the last time I shaved. I mean, it was fun. So we went up there, and the Marietta Bronco team did very well. They got in the winner's bracket right off the bat, and therefore we sat around the pool a lot.
Right.
And one particular day, John said, I want to eat seafood. So I said, okay. He said, get a map and figure it out. So we went to the shore, and the road ended. There was the ocean, and there was a seafood place here and a seafood place there. And we enjoyed ourselves. We sat there and ate seafood, watched the birds and the boats and everything else. Well, then we came back, and the Marietta team had won a berth in the World Series.
Wow.
Which was being held in Mexico City. And being the kid,
Right.
I was no longer part of the A team. So our general manager, Larry Steinel, said, John, you're staying here. I'm going to Mexico City. And I thought, well, you dirty dog, you.
Right. If the game would have been played in Idaho, you probably still would have been on that call.
I probably would have been on that. But the end of the story was they went to Mexico. The kids did okay, but they cut Montezuma's revenge. And I kind of quietly laughed and didn't say a word, but
kept it to yourself. You're like, okay, I'm fine here in Marietta.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm drinking the water, and you guys went and drank the water in Mexico City, and now you have that to deal with. But
that's a fantastic story, and that's the voice of John Richardson here on local radio. We're about 6 minutes away from the top. This special Talk of the Town edition brought to you by Morrison Incorporated and Baker Jewelers. And John, just great conversation so far. Any more stories, archived of just some of the great time, maybe not so good times here in the radio world?
There's a lot of memories that go back with it. I remember living around the corner when the nursing home caught on fire. And Rich and Ernie Hartong lived in an apartment across the street. And like most able-bodied college men, they went over to help. And I don't remember who was working that time, but Larry Steinel, who was the GM, came up, and he took over the radio station, and he switched from whatever we were playing in the world of rock and roll at the time to the world of Madhavani and the easy listening music. It was a terrible tragedy for Marietta. That's just a very, very small part of it. But the local response,
right?
People from the station helping out. Larry grabbing the reins of the station and saying, this is not the time for rock and roll. There's terrible tragedy going on, and we need to take care of it. Probably the neatest story I can give you is, a long time ago, back in that era, Green Line's steamer was going to have the last run of the Delta Queen.
Oh, okay.
So we took a remote broadcasting thing. I believe it was called a Marty at the time.
Yeah, we still had a Marty.
Okay. Well, Larry went down to Portsmouth, Ohio, and he gets on the Delta Queen, and he was broadcasting live coming up the river.
Wow.
We get to Marietta. Everybody else, there was some poor guy that got stuck up here, but everybody else from the station was down there. I remember Bill White playing the Calliope on the Delta Queen. It was just amazing for a young person. And the people from Green Line said, WMOA has done so much for Green Lines, and we want to thank you. Would you like to go for a ride? And it was like, well, yeah.
And kind of look around. Am I allowed to? Okay, yeah.
No. Ray Rosenblum had a big station wagon. It was like one of the 9-passenger station wagons. And we got the office manager, Janet Potmeyer, to drive up to the dam. And the rest of us rode the Delta Queen up to the dam. And I can remember, I think I was 18 years old, maybe 19 years old, standing on the Texas deck of the Delta Queen drinking a beer, just watching the world go by. So that's probably one of the more memorable ones.
And you can't beat that. I mean, Brett Wharff and myself, my co-host who's in the Stimulus Studios today, we were down when the Sternwheelers came, and the people that were talking to us, and I'm sure you have similar stories of, they heard our voice and they said, hey, you're the guys on the radio, and they're not even from the area, but every time that they come in, they tune into WMOA, and they said you were talking about the Sternwheeler that just got hit this morning, and we got that story, and it's just such an ingrained part of the community, and I'm just humbled to be joined by pros like you and many others throughout the month to just remind me you got to give it your all each time, in the words of Ralph Allen, and I think that's just special. And just in the last 90 seconds or so, sir, just you can kind of continue off that, or maybe just talk about, the cast of characters from your time at WMOA.
Well, Ray Rosenblum owned the station. Larry Steinel was the general manager. Unfortunately, they have both passed. Janet Potmeyer was the office manager. Dick Sams is my buddy of 50 years. He lives one street away from me, he and his wife Diana. And Rich Galen did news. Ernie Hartong did sports and whatever else was needed. Of course, Big John Wharff was the sports director and the sales manager. Doug Bernhardy was in there. I remember that name. A fellow by the name of Mike Weber was in the Air Force. He used the handle "The Fool on the Hill." I worked the night shift up here. And,
right.
That was the main thing. Of course, we mentioned Don Statz coming through and several others. Just fine people. I can't say a bad thing about any of them.